Hey there, welcome to A Course in Miracles Applied. Today's topic is called How the Bloody Hell Did We Get Here? Subheader: From the Tiny Mad Idea to the Making of the World. In our last segment, we discussed the metaphysical foundation of A Course in Miracles. At the core of it lies paragraph 2 of the introduction to the text, where it says, "Nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, herein lies the peace of God." And we spoke about the non-dualistic nature of A Course in Miracles, where there is truth and there's illusion, and nothing in between. We discussed terms like heaven, oneness, life, love, Christ, God, eternity, changelessness, and such. Anything we look at from this point forward is part of the illusion, and therefore not real. However, Jesus with this course picks us up where we are in the illusory world and eventually leads us out of it into the peace of God. He describes the journey from our home in God, where we think from our home in God to where we think we are, which is here, seemingly in a body and in a world, as a myth. It's a story, and by definition, not true. But because we can't grasp truth, as we said in the previous segment, we need symbols that don't increase our fear, and symbols that slowly and very gently lead us beyond them to the home that we have never left. The, quote, detour into fear that is described in the text, chapter 2, section 1, begins with a tiny, mad idea. We will now go back to that moment and to the moment just before this idea seemingly entered the mind of God. When we begin this story, there's only oneness. There's a sea of love and light, eternal and forever. Complete peace encompasses everything, and the thoughts of God are everywhere as they are everything with no interruption. The Course says, "The light expands and covers everything, extending to infinity, forever shining, and with no break or limit anywhere. Within it, everything is joined in perfect continuity. Nor is it possible to imagine that anything could be outside, for there is nowhere that this light is not." That is in the text, chapter 21, section 1. So, the oneness of heaven and of eternal love is forever and unchanging, right? We can imagine it as an ocean that ebbs and flows in continuity and perpetuity. There's nothing outside this ocean and nothing else within. It is one within itself, with no limits and no boundaries. And then something happens that could not happen. But because we believe it happened, Jesus tells the story as if it had happened. It begins with this, quote, "Into eternity, where all is one, there crept a tiny mad idea, at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh." That is in the text, chapter 27, section 8. The idea was, what if there's more than everything? What if there's more than the all-encompassing love of the Creator? What if there's more than complete peace? This idea is so incredible and unbelievable that the only reaction is to laugh at its impossibility. But one tiny, minuscule part of the whole of God and knowledge forgot to laugh. The tiniest drop within the vast ocean believed for but one instant that it would be possible to have more than everything. There were two responses to this tiny mad idea. The one and only sane and true response is the one that says it is impossible. To stay with our image, if the tiniest drop within the ocean would have stopped there, it would have simply continued within the vastness of its home, experiencing eternal peace and all-encompassing love and joy. In fact, for the ocean, nothing ever happened. But the tiniest drop of water considered the thought of more, and for one instant gave it reality. The paragraph continues, in his forgetting, did the thought become a serious idea, and possible of both accomplishment and real effects. That is the continuation of chapter 27, section 8, paragraph 6. It was at that moment that the ego was born. The ego is nothing more than the thought that it is possible to separate from God, to separate from the all-encompassing love and eternal peace of God. The single drop of water held the thought that it was possible to separate from the ocean for one moment. In that moment, the two responses were present. At that instant, we, which means all of us, as one tiny part in the mind of God, turned toward the ego, toward the possibility of separating from God, and considered this possibility that said, yes, it is possible to have more than everything. Listening to this idea, listening to this idea was the birth moment of the ego. It's important to note that the ego cannot exist on its own. The thought of separation from God cannot exist on its own. It has no power in and of itself and can stay alive only through our belief in it. Therefore, the ego devises a plan with its one and only goal to make sure we never, ever decide against it. The moment we decide against the ego, it is finished because it cannot exist without us. The ego doesn't know about love, God, oneness, eternity, heaven, and such. All it knows is that it depends on our choice to stay alive. It must make sure we continuously choose it. Or better, never even get to the place from where we can make the choice against it, which is in the mind. And so it comes up with a story. This story, the ego tells us, is centered around sin. It tells us that not only is it possible to separate from God, it actually has happened. You have done it, it says. You are an individual now, but this individual existence comes with a price. The price of your freedom is the death of God. As individuality and oneness cannot coexist, one has to die in order for the other one to live. Because you are alive, as an individual now, you have killed God. That is a sin. You have murdered your father, your source, the one who gave you life. You have stolen the very life from your creator. With that, you have destroyed your home and can never go back. Imagine you live in a beautiful, light-filled place surrounded by people you love and who love you, with a father and mother who care deeply for your comfort. You have never known anything other than this peace. And now, from one moment to the next, it is gone. You are separated from all of it. And not only that, you believe that you have destroyed it and that you can never ever go back to it. Paradise is gone forever. And what's left is a barren wasteland of nothingness, with no love, no comfort, no happiness, and no hope of ever returning. Until the ego introduced the concept of sin, we still had a choice between the Holy Spirit and the ego. The separation in and of itself, being impossible, doesn't hold any weight yet. It is nothing. It is like a feather in the wind. We look at the choice for individuality and we look at the choice for oneness, and that choice isn't hard to make, especially because the pull from God to us is still very strong. But once sin enters the picture, we forget the other option. We become preoccupied with guilt, the predominant experience that follows the idea of sin. The reason why, as Jesus says, the Son of God remembered not to laugh is because we took the idea of sin seriously. We forgot to laugh because suddenly everything became very serious. Sin is a serious idea. Guilt is an overwhelming experience that is not a laughing matter unless you're with the Holy Spirit, who knows that the cause for the sin and therefore for this guilt is not real, is impossible. When we read, in his forgetting did the thought become a serious idea and possible of both accomplishment and real effects. It is the ego's story of sin and our believing in it, our acceptance of it, that makes us forget the Holy Spirit. Now we ask the ego, what can I do to get rid of this overwhelming sense of sin and guilt over what I have done? And how do I deal with this tremendous loss I feel inside? The ego replies, I will help you with all of it. But for me to help you, you must promise me, you must swear to me that you will never abandon me, but will always, always stay by my side. Otherwise, this betrayal will be punishable by death and endless suffering. Do you understand? And we said, yes, we understand. The guilt over having murdered God completely fills our mind at that point. It is everything we can think about. And our singular focus is to try to get rid of it. This guilt blots out our memory of God, our home. This guilt is excruciating. And because we have forgotten the thought that separation from God is not possible and that our home cannot be destroyed, we are fully focused on dealing with the guilt, which is exactly what the ego wants. If we are preoccupied with guilt, we are unable to make a choice against the ego. That is the first defense. To have us feel such guilt, we cannot form a clear or reasonable thought any longer. From this moment on, the ego's plan is to keep us engaged with guilt in one way, shape, or form. We want to get rid of it, but the ego wants us to keep it, again, because guilt prevents us from making a choice against it. The Course says, for it is guilt that has obscured the Father to you. That's what we just said. And it is guilt that has driven you insane. That is in the text, chapter 13, introduction. It is crucial, I think, when working with the Course to always keep the ego's motivation in mind. In order for it to stay alive, it must make our sole focus in life to be guilt without knowing that we do so. Let's see what happens next in our myth, in our story. So the ego says, I have a plan for you to get rid of your guilt once and for all. Listen closely, your life depends on it. And we listen. We listen so intently that nothing else matters anymore. The ego tells us that we can get rid of this guilt, this overwhelming truth about ourselves, that we have killed our Creator. We can first deny it, split it apart from us, and then push it far, far outside. We can forget it ever existed, and we can give it away. Give it away, we ask. Yes. Take everything you hate about yourself. You believe that you're a killer, a monster, an unworthy bottom feeder, a second-class citizen who has betrayed his father by separating from him and thus destroyed the love of God. Take all of that and give it all to the one entity that exists besides you, namely God. Now you are rid of it. And we do. For one short moment, we will feel triumph and release, as the guilt over what we have done now seemingly rests with God. We are no longer the murderer. God is. We are innocent and He is the guilty one. But what always happens with the solutions the ego provides happens here. They do not work. Having given the belief I am a killer to God, He now has it. And if God is now the killer, who is He going to kill? Us. The terror we experience at that moment is unmatched. This is the birthplace of fear. The ego tells us, you have usurped the place of God. Think not He has forgotten. That is in the Manual for Teachers, chapter 17. It says there, here we have the fear of God most starkly represented. For in that thought has guilt already raised madness to the throne of God Himself. And now there is no hope except to kill. Here is salvation now. An angry father pursues his guilty son. Kill or be killed, for here alone is choice. Beyond this there is none, for what was done cannot be done without. The stain of blood can never be removed, and anyone who bears this stain on him must meet with death. The ego has eliminated our only hope of ever getting back to sanity, because with our projection and attack onto God, we made our source the one to be feared. Now we are in abject terror because we believe God will take the life back from us that we stole from Him. And we again ask the ego, our only counsel at this moment, for help. The ego tells us what the ego must tell us, providing it stays true to its own motivation, right? The ego wants us never to return to the choice point in our mind. Not only are we preoccupied with guilt, we are now also afraid, utterly afraid of God. The ego counsels us to leave the mind, where God is waiting for us to take revenge. The ego now tells the Son of God that the best way to leave the mind, this terrible, terrible place, is to make a place that is outside the mind. So we, as one God, as one Son, as one fragmented part, make the world under the ego's guidance. We design it as a hiding place and a depository of guilt. We then, as the one small separated part of God, split up into billions and billions of fragments. And while we splinter into an almost infinite number of parts, we drop a veil across our mind. And we forget everything that happened up until this point. Each of us is now a body, a form, a stranger in a strange world, a victim of circumstances with no recollection of how we got here and what to do, and most importantly, what we are. The Course says, here is your promise never to allow union to call you out of separation, the great amnesia in which the memory of God seems quite forgotten. That is in the Obstacles to Peace text chapters 19:4. The world is now the mirror image of what is in our mind, which is the eternal battle of good versus evil, kill or be killed, of one or the other, of victim and victimizer, and us versus God. The Course says, you who believe that God is fear made but one substitution. It has taken many forms because it was the substitution of illusion for truth, of fragmentation for wholeness. It has become so splintered and subdivided and divided again over and over that it is now almost impossible to perceive it once was one and still is what it was. That one error which brought truth to illusion, infinity to time, and life to death was all you ever made. Your whole world rests upon it. Everything you see reflects it, and every special relationship that you have ever made is part of it. That is from the text chapter 18, section 1. So far so good, right? Let's talk about the world, which includes all of time, the far reaches of space, our galaxy, planet Earth, and everything on it. The whole universe is part of it, not just this world, but for now, let's start with our world, and let's start with what the world is made of. It can only be made of the same material its source is made of, namely, whatever was in the mind that then split into billions and billions of fragments and projected outward. When we look at the world, we must realize that the very same content that is present in the mind is present in the world. The first principle we can talk about is the principle of one or the other. That is the ego's very fundamental core principle. One or the other is us versus God. Us or God. Either we live and God is dead, or God lives and we are dead. Either oneness exists or individuality. We see this principle reflected in the fact that for any one thing on earth to live, another thing must die. The whole natural world, quote unquote, is based on this principle. We consume oxygen in order to live. Everything must take something from the outside and use it to survive, be that light, water, or nutrients of any kind. The world is the projection of the thought of separation. No living organism can exist without cells separating from each other and thereby growing. Separation is at the core of the ego thought system, so it is at the core of the building blocks of this world. The same is for differences. No snowflakes are alike. No fingerprint is the same. Each leaf of every tree or bush or flower on the planet is ever so slightly different from each other. Each sunrise is different, each day is different. The separation in the mind has been denied and then projected outward into the world, and that is what we see. We cannot see without differences. We cannot see anything without the object being different from the background. We cannot see without contrast. Another principle is that of scarcity. Nothing here is complete within itself. Everything needs something else to survive. Let's go from the wider world to the body. The very same principles apply. The body needs to consume something from the outside in order to live. We need food, oxygen, water, sun, etc. We need clothes. We need AC. We need heat. We need to sleep and rest. We need to move. Our cells separate from each other, from one another, in order for anything to grow. Each one of us is different from the other. We can only see, hear, feel, smell, and taste through contrast. We are born needing everything, unable to care for ourselves, and death is inevitable. Change is constant. Nothing lasts. Psychologically and emotionally, we are dependent on other people's behavior, the weather, how our body behaves, the economy, the climate, and the political landscape. Our state of mind is influenced by the world. That is the purpose of the world, to make it the cause and our mind the effect. If we are the effect, we have no power. If we have no power, the ego's goal has been reached, because if we are powerless, we cannot decide against the ego. The world was made to have absolute power over the Son of God. As such, the world fulfills the ego's purpose 100%. It was made as the opposite of heaven. That's why it is not eternal, not one, not based on life but death, not changeless, not grounded in love, but the law of lack and deprivation. The Course says, quote, "The world was made as an attack on God." That is the workbook, part 2, section 3. We attacked and are still attacking God by giving him our guilt, and then we make the world as a place, quote, "where God can enter not." That is in the text, chapter 18, section 8. And then, in an act of brilliance, the ego gives us a God who not only interacts with the world, but who has actually made it. Now there's no escape at all, because if God made the world and the world has power over us, then there's nowhere to go for help. It's like we're asking a corrupt policeman for help when he's in on the very scheme we're asking help about. Besides us seemingly being without power, and the world having all the power, there's one additional item worth thinking about. In all the world, with all its attractions and beautiful things, relationships and possibilities and Disneyland, where is peace in it? Where is love? I don't mean love that is dependent on people being a certain way. I mean all-encompassing love rooted in the oneness of heaven. Lesson 122 in the workbook, "Forgiveness offers everything I want," talks about what forgiveness offers us. I modified the first paragraph of the lesson to fit our topic. The lesson asks, for example, do you want peace? I just changed it to, do you experience peace? The lesson asks, do you want comfort? I just changed it to, do you experience comfort? And such. It says, do you experience peace? Do you experience happiness, a quiet mind, a certainty of purpose, and a sense of worth and beauty that transcends the world? Do you experience care and safety and the warmth of sure protection always? Do you experience a quietness that cannot be disturbed, a gentleness that never can be hurt, a deep abiding comfort and a rest so perfect it can never be upset? If we're honest, the answer is no. Here and there we get a glimpse, and here and there, while other people meet our needs, while we sit and watch a sunset or swim in the ocean, we feel okay. But when was the last time we felt a, quote, deep, abiding comfort and a rest so perfect it can never be upset? The answer is, we don't remember. We cannot be peaceful or feel comforted because we have left our source, our home in heaven, the oneness of eternal love and peace, and we are now in a place that is its exact opposite. How can we possibly have peace here or expect to have peace here? We live in constant scarcity. Death is a large part of our life, and as the paragraph below states, we seem to lose what we love. The Course says, the world you see is the delusional system of those made mad by guilt. Look carefully at this world and you will realize that this is so. For this world is the symbol of punishment, and all the laws that seem to govern it are the laws of death. Children are born into it through pain and in pain. Their growth is attended by suffering, and they learn of sorrow and separation and death. Their minds seem to be trapped in their brain and its powers to decline if their bodies are hurt. They seem to love, yet they desert and are deserted. They appear to lose what they love, perhaps the most insane belief of all. And their bodies wither and gasp and are laid in the ground and are no more. Not one of them but has thought that God is cruel. That is in chapter 13, introduction. Jesus asks us to look carefully at the world. This seems at times like a hopeless endeavor because we sometimes don't see anything other than our judgment everywhere, right? It's important to look at the world as it is, without the veil of unawareness over our eyes. Only then can we look beyond it to the love that the world can reflect back to us. If we decide for the Holy Spirit, we will see the world in a completely different light. With Jesus or the Holy Spirit as our teacher, the world changes from a prison to a classroom. We can see each day as an opportunity to heal the separation that exists in our mind. We can look at the world as the mirror of our own thoughts, and by doing so, reversing the journey into darkness of the ego thought system. We can begin by seeing that we all don't have separate interests, because we are all split up parts of the same mind with the very same content. We can learn how to see that we are all in the same boat. We are all caught up in a nightmare of sin, guilt, and fear, and we're all dealing with it to the best of our ability. Our projections of guilt outward become our classroom to reclaim, first, that the guilt rests within and not without, and second, that the guilt itself is made up in place to keep us from making a choice for the Holy Spirit. The Course says, projection makes perception. The world you see is what you gave it, nothing more than that. But though it is no more than that, it is not less. Therefore, to you it is important. It is the witness to your state of mind, the outside picture of an inward condition. That is chapter 21, introduction. So once we begin to look at our projections, we will also begin to see the world in a different light. First, it might appear to get darker. The world is the same, but we slowly take away the veil of unawareness we have dropped across our eyes. We now, for a while, see the ugliness more clearly. This is painful because the ugliness is within us, not outside. We may for a while see separation and war and conflict everywhere. The separation is not outside either, it is within us. In short, we will experience a good deal of discomfort once we begin to lift the veil. But the end is inevitable. Once we begin this journey back, we cannot stop. We can postpone, procrastinate, and delay, but our direction is set. The healing of our mind mostly happens within relationships, because relationships are where the most guilt is deposited. This is because our first relationship after the separation was with God, onto whom we have projected all of our guilt. This relationship projected outward is the blueprint for all relationships in this world, without exception. When we invite the Holy Spirit into our relationships, we slowly change their purpose, from guilt to innocence, and we will see this change very, very slowly happen when we look at the world. As a closing, I'm going to read paragraph 9 from chapter 18, section 1 in the text. It says, in your relationship with your brother, where he has taken charge, he, the Holy Spirit, has taken charge of everything at your request, he has set the course inward to the truth you share. In the mad world outside you, nothing can be shared, but only substituted, and sharing and substituting have nothing in common in reality. Within yourself you love your brother with a perfect love. Here is holy ground, in which no substitution can enter, and where only the truth in your brother can abide. Here are you joined with God, as much together as you are with him. The original error has not entered here, nor ever will. Here is the radiant truth to which the Holy Spirit has committed your relationship. Let him bring it here, where you would have it be. Give him but a little faith in your brother, to help him show you that no substitute you made for heaven can keep you from it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.